My name is Emma Robinson, and I've researched the fashion industry's influence on the secondhand clothing market. As you may or may not know, the fashion industry is terrible, especially for the environment. This $1.3 trillion industry accounts for 10% of all global carbon emissions, and the average shirt is only worn 7 times before it's thrown away. But how do we fix this? I personally began to shop secondhand, which meant I would buy used clothing at a fraction of the retail price. This has become very popular amongst younger people, especially in the last 15 years. The rise in popularity has also seen a rise in thrift store prices, and the market as a whole is totally transforming, which leads us to ask, how has the secondhand clothing market been impacted by the supply chain and the consumer in North America? There were 3 main anticipated findings that were researched during this inquiry. Fast fashion has made clothing seem disposable and thrifting too expensive. Sustainability matters to consumers, and the fashion industry has had the largest influence on Gen Z. I'll start with the first finding. Fast fashion began in the mid-20th century with the increase in the speed of fashion supply chain, which has drastically impacted the industry. Then now dozens of fashion seasons changed so quickly that clothing is going from stores to donation bins at an alarming rate, and the amount of clothing produced is doubled over the last 20 years. Thrift stores are seeing all of these clothing items, and only 20% of them are actually getting sold into stores. With only 10% being recycled, the other 80% is going into landfills all over the world. This influx in fast fashion and thrift stores has also led to an overall decline in clothing quality since fast fashion clothing is made so cheaply. This has been another major change. While the secondhand clothing market was a way to sell clothing cheaper than retail, retail is now the cheapest that it's ever been, so to turn a profit, the gap between retail and secondhand pricing is closing. Now for the final 2 findings. Climate change seems to be heard everywhere, even in the fashion industry. Companies are talking about how their clothing is made out of recycled material, amongst other things, but is this because of the consumer? It turns out it's not. As Professor Kelly Burton says, consumers don't drive the industry drives itself, and this can be seen in the rampant consumerism. People care more about getting a good deal or looking good more than they care about the planet, especially Gen Z. While Gen Z does care more about the planet than other generations, they care even more about standing out, thanks to social media. Gen Z does thrift the most, however they also shop for the most clothing, and the fashion industry is taking advantage of this fact with their marketing. Ultimately, the fashion industry seems to recognize there is a problem with overproduction, but it is seemingly dumped onto the secondhand market to deal with or the consumer. So as engineers, we need to make changes within to improve the various aspects of the supply chain, overall making it more circular. One great way would be to improve and expand the garment recycling just as it is for household items, and also reducing the waste in production steps. This is an industry that is not kept up in terms of innovation, and engineers would be able to assist with this transformation.